Hi, Dr. Bobby here. Welcome to Balance and Burnout, Sustaining Your Creative Energy. We can all struggle to keep up our enthusiasm and feel the passion. And when it fizzles, it can be really hard to get back on track and feel that energy and motivation to keep creating, keep moving forward with your creative business. Instead of waiting to deal with burnout once it arrives, let's talk about ways to improve the balance in our lives to help prevent burnout from happening, and also things to do when you're feeling bored or like your creative juices are running dry or you're kind of losing steam on what it is that you want to be working on. As a creative, I'm sure you know that inspiration and creative ideas can't be forced. Like the second you tell me to come up with a creative idea, it's like, I've never had one in my entire life. So the strategies I'll talk about today aren't about forcing yourself to find inspiration. It's actually more about how to slow down and find the balance so that inspiration can keep coming. And remember, there is a normal ebb and flow to creativity. Okay, so what we'll cover today is first I'm going to talk about what kind of creative burnout I'm talking about today, because it's different than full-on burnout. And then I'm going to offer 8 strategies for sustaining creative energy and avoiding burnout. And then I'll offer at the end some tips for implementing these strategies. Okay, let's get started. So creative burnout is what I'm talking about preventing today. And it's different than full-on burnout, which is characterized by emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. And burnout, true full-on burnout, looks and feels a lot like depression. And that's a different problem. It's a very real problem, but it's not something I'm going to tackle today. What I'm talking about today is the kind of creative burnout where you're struggling to find motivation or joy or inspiration in your work. And you might feel stuck or disconnected from your projects or just frustrated by things that used to excite you. But things in the rest of your life are going okay. You might have difficulty generating new ideas or staying engaged in the creative process. And often this happens with prolonged stress or just the absence of balance between your creative work and personal rejuvenation. It can happen from going too hard on something. And goodness knows, I love to go too hard on something. I do it all the time, but I pay a price. So I'm listening to this workshop as well as giving it. So just to summarize, creative burnout isn't as global as complete burnout. It's more limited to your creativity, your inspiration, and your motivation around your creative work. Okay, so let's talk about 8 strategies for sustaining creative energy and avoiding burnout. The first one is tried and true, so you are probably familiar with it. And that's because it is one of the most fundamental ways to avoid burnout and keep your creative juices flowing. And that is to take breaks. Constantly being on doesn't allow for the necessary downtime for new ideas to formulate or for the creative project you're working on right now to kind of percolate and develop. And near constant work is absolutely a risk factor for burnout. I'm going to talk about 2 types of breaks. The first one is daily short breaks where you take a break from everything, and this should happen more than once a day. And then the other type of break is longer breaks from a particular creative project where you set it down even if you keep working on other things for days, weeks, however long you need to let it rest. Okay, so the first kind of break is the daily short breaks. Now, ideally you should take these multiple times a day, every couple of hours. And it can be anything from taking a quick walk outdoors to spending just a few minutes in some kind of mindfulness meditation. Pick up your phone and text or call a family member. Anything where you set aside your work, put down the computer, put down your paintbrush, your pencils, and just go and do something completely different for at least 10 minutes. If you can add some kind of movement into this break, bonus points. Yeah, getting your body moving, especially if your creative work is sedentary. I work a lot in digital formats, and that's very sedentary. And then I also work a lot painting, and I'm standing at my work surface, but it's still like not moving around. It's just standing, which is better than sitting. But I still find that taking breaks from that, even if it's just like a break to walk around the house and, like start a load of laundry and get a drink of water or something, just moving around and taking a break from the actual work itself is an important way to keep your energy up. The second kind of break is when you're really noticing that you're losing steam on a particular project and you're just going to decide to set it aside and take a break from it. You might just feel bored with something, or you might feel blocked, and you can just leave it for a while. Unless it's a work project where there's a deadline for someone, for an employer or a client, if it's your own work on your own deadline, you can adjust the deadlines. You can do whatever you want. If you have a vacation coming up, that's the perfect time to take an extended break from a project, but you don't need a vacation. You can decide to take a vacation from a certain project and just mark it on your calendar, like, you know what, I'm not even going to look at this for 2 weeks, and on this date in 2 weeks, I'm going to pick it up again and see how I feel about it. Taking these days or weeks disconnected from a particular project really can rekindle your inspiration and motivation. Whenever our computer stops working, we're supposed to turn it off and turn it back on again. And that's what I'm talking about here in taking this break, is just, turn it off and then switch it back on again and see if it's working better. I know my passion for my work really goes out the window when I'm overworking on it. At first, it might feel great because I'm so enthusiastic and so it's all I want to do and I'm working on it. But there's that price to be paid on the back end where I'll lose steam and I'll just get really tired of it. So if I can take those shorter breaks along the way and intermingle the work with other things that I'm working on, it helps prevent that burnout. But if I do just sort of succumb to it and go really long and hard on one project and lose steam, that's when I know, like, okay, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to look at it in a week or two. And that just invariably kind of kickstarts my creativity on that particular project again. Before I move on to the next strategy, I just want to reiterate that it's excellent if movement can be part of your breaks. Getting away from your desk, getting away from your workshop or your studio, and moving your body is just a huge self-preservation tool. I could go on and on about the importance of exercise. This course isn't about that, but having a regular exercise routine isn't just good for your body and your brain, it's actually good for your creativity too. Okay, moving on to strategy number 2, and that is to try something new. If you're losing steam or inspiration on a project, consider spending time doing something completely unrelated to your work. Try a new hobby, read a book, explore a new art form, anything new that's purely for fun and for your own creative curiosity. If you want to stay within your own discipline, that's fine. Try a new software, try a new medium or a tool or a technique. I did this recently. I was just feeling kind of in a rut with a collection that I was making mostly from importing my paintings into Adobe Illustrator. And I tried something new. I took a Skillshare class on texture and texture brushes in Adobe Illustrator, which I hardly ever use. And that was really fun and inspiring. It was new. It wasn't unrelated to my work, but it was totally new. I barely even used brushes in Illustrator before. And it really got my creative juices flowing in terms of the collection I was working on because I had this new technique to bring to it. If you want to go outside your discipline, totally great also. This is like, when a writer takes a pottery class, or if I were to take a welding class, which is kind of a dream of mine. I need to do it. Just do something that's creative but outside your discipline is a way to really fuel your creativity. Having fun as a beginner with something new is just a great way to rekindle your creativity and your inspiration. One fun way to do this, if you're having trouble thinking of something new that you want to do, look for a challenge or a project that's happening. You can search them on Instagram or in the creative people that are in your world. If they're offering some kind of challenge, it can really get you outside of your usual way of working to work within the confines of like a drawing challenge or a daily challenge to do like a certain, make one doodle a day, that kind of thing. It can give you some structure if you're not really sure what to do, if you just join someone else's challenge. I know Inktober is coming up, and it's a month-long art challenge that takes place every October where artists create an ink drawing every day and share it online. And it's really fun. And I don't work in ink a lot, so this is a fun way for me to do something new and get outside of my usual routine. It also just helps improve my ink skills and helps me develop better drawing habits. This is just one example of all the different art challenges that are out there. You may or may not be watching this when it's almost, right now it's like the end of September, so it's almost October, but you might be watching this when it's a different time of year. But there are always monthly challenges going on, so check them out. Okay, number 3 is to get inspired by others. Turning to other people's work gives you access to fresh inspiration. You can do this at home by looking at books, reading books, listening to podcasts. You can do it out in the community by going to museums and art galleries. And you know what? I want you to include yourself in the others group by getting inspiration from your own old work to see how far you've come. Others' inspiration tends to be infectious, and it'll help get you back into the swing of things. It's also part of taking a break from your work. So it's a little bit combining number 1 with number 3. A really important part of getting inspired by others is to connect with other creatives. Creation can be a lonely and isolating activity, especially if you work from home or if you're a solo entrepreneur. So connecting and collaborating with other creatives can help you get support, motivation, feedback, accountability, and just help you build relationships and community. This course is part of the Creative Ease membership. So likely you're watching this because you're a member. And so that is part of having community, is our community. The accountability and the relationships in it are so valuable. Okay, number 4 is to set boundaries around your creative work. Remember, your creative work is a marathon, so don't run it like it's a sprint. And what's going to help with that is learning how to set boundaries around it so that you don't burn out. Here are just a few reasons for setting boundaries around your creative work. First of all, it provides more balance to your life, and it helps avoid burnout, fatigue, and boredom. It also helps keep your health and hobbies and relationships on track because you need all of these things to be balanced. And I know in part because creativity ebbs and flows, when it's flowing, it can be easy to get out of balance with things. So having some kind of boundaries to keep you in check so that you can take advantage of the times when your creativity flows without burning out is really helpful. And you'll be able to recharge and refresh to keep the creativity flowing for longer periods of time. Here are a few quick tips for setting boundaries around your creative work. The first is to block out off hours or time that you won't work on your creative business. So for example, saying, I'm not available for work-related communication after 6 p.m. So you don't check your work email after 6 p.m. and I promise nothing horrible is going to happen. If you're in the habit of being really available online, it can feel like a hard habit to break. But that ease of relinquishing that responsibility can really free up energy for these other parts of your life and help you feel more balanced. Another tip is to have a designated workspace. It gives you a physical boundary between your creative life and the rest of your life. I recently saw a really cool, I think it was on Apartment Therapy, but it was a really cool artist studio apartment. And it was all one big loft room, and their easels and work was over on one side and their kitchen and bed and couch were over on the other side. And it was so cool. But I also looked at it and I thought, oh man, they never get away from their work. And I think as gorgeous as it was, I don't think I would want to live in that situation. I think it would be really hard for me to have some kind of balance. So it can feel seductive, right? To surround ourselves with our creativity. It can be very energizing at times, but part of nurturing our creativity is nurturing all these other parts of ourselves that just keeps us going in a healthy way. And then the third tip is setting time limits. So set a limit that you won't work on one particular project more than a certain amount of time. This will help prevent burnout on that project. So, for example, if I work for 4 hours on a certain project, I'll set it aside and I'll do other things for the rest of the day. I might feel like I want to keep going, but I've noticed that when I do, I will wear out more on that project. I'll lose enthusiasm for that project because I'm overdoing it. The argument can be made that, oh, when the creativity's flowing, I just want to go with it. I just want to keep doing this. And it's compelling, and I fall prey to that a lot. But honestly, what I've noticed is that if I take a break when I'm really excited and I pick it up the next day, I'm still really excited. Instead of working 9 hours on something because I'm so into it, and then by the end, I'm just exhausted. So my limit's 4 hours. Yours can be whatever you want. But having some kind of limit so that you don't overdo it in one particular area will help provide the balance. Okay, the fifth strategy for having balance and avoiding burnout is that books and courses can really help. It's a really efficient and usually fun way of injecting some inspiration and knowledge and practical tips for maintaining your creative spark and maintaining your personal well-being. One example I found to be so powerful for so many people is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And part of doing The Artist's Way is doing morning pages. If you know, you know. It's highly recommended. There are so many books and courses out there. This is just one example. So find what works for you. But I know that The Artist's Way is just a classic for helping artists to reconnect with their creativity. Also, and I've mentioned Skillshare already, there are so many courses, and they're not just creative art courses. There are also self-improvement courses, business courses. So that is such a valuable resource for learning new things. The annual membership compared to the amount of courses you can take makes it, I think, the best value out there for courses. I'm an affiliate with Skillshare, so if I put a link in here, just so you know, if you join Skillshare through that link, I might get a small portion of the cost. I think if you sign up through the link, you get a discount or a free month or something, I forget. I'll put the link on there. Okay, the sixth strategy is to talk things out. There's a proverb you might be familiar with that a problem shared is a problem halved. And if you're carrying a heavy burden of feeling uninspired and frustrated and bored, just talking about it with someone can be the breakthrough that you need. It can make it easier for you to recognize exactly what it is that's pulling you down or holding you back. And it can be anyone. It can be a friend, a colleague, a family member. Even if you don't have anyone right now to talk about it with, you can journal about it. And that act of putting your thoughts and feelings into words helps your brain to process. Okay, the seventh strategy is to be open to change. Maybe you're going through these steps and you're trying all these things and nothing's really helping and you're still feeling really unmotivated or stuck about a certain creative project. Sometimes a bigger change is called for. Change doesn't have to mean something drastic. It could mean tweaking a project you're working on. It's just pivoting and adapting and evolving. You have the right to change your mind. And that's not failure. I was working on a painting series, this was a few years ago, and it was intended, the theme of it was one of my favorite albums. And I was listening to the album and painting a series of paintings, and I was trying to express the emotion that this album gives to me. And it wasn't working at all, and I tried putting it down and coming back to it and taking breaks and talking about it with people who also really liked that album and talking about it with painter friends, just trying all these things. And it just wasn't working, and I finally decided that it just wasn't time for that series. And it was tempting to feel like I attempted something and I failed, but I did some sort of cognitive behavioral therapy on myself and reminded myself that it wasn't a failure, it was just like trying something, and I learned stuff. I set it aside. I think I actually painted over those canvases and, I moved on and it was fine. And I look back on it now, and it's just part of my history was that I tried a project and it didn't work out. So being willing to adapt and pivot also means being willing to change course and to give some things up. And that's totally okay. Also remember that if you're running a creative business, you've monetized something that used to just be pure passion. So you want to be able to take into account that a big part of having this creative business is to continue to enjoy your passion while running a business and making money at it. We all want our creative businesses to be profitable, but we also want to include our passion in the equation of running the business. And that's why sometimes you might make a decision that doesn't earn you peak money, but if it feels in line with staying passionate about your work, then I would argue that that's a solid decision. It reminds me of a friend who ran a pretty profitable business selling her ceramics at markets year-round, but she was exhausted by it and was kind of starting to not look forward to the markets. For several years, she loved them, and they were just starting to feel like a drudgery. So she looked at her numbers and realized that the bulk of her income was earned around the holiday months. So she decided to stop doing markets year-round and just focus on the holidays and then work on other things the rest of the year. And it was a difficult emotional decision for her because it felt like when she wasn't showing up for a spring market that she had quit, she had given up. And it wasn't. It was a really solid decision. She was happier afterwards with the new arrangement and focusing actually on the most profitable part. I think she ended up breaking even income-wise while working less and feeling less burned out. So that's just an example of how pivoting and changing, it doesn't mean leaving your discipline or throwing something in the trash. It can just mean figuring out a way to keep your passion going while still engaging. A clear pivot might be called for when you notice that there's just this gap between where you are right now and where you envision yourself thriving. Listen to your intuition about where you're misaligned, and that can give you some guidance about what kind of change you might want to implement. Okay, number 8 for finding more balance and avoiding burnout is prioritizing rest and renewal. In order to maintain your creative energy, your creative vitality, you want to honor your natural rhythms. So remember that rest and sleep are not luxuries. They are necessary for preventing and combating burnout. One way to strategically engage in some renewal is anytime you notice yourself having really intense focus session, take time to rejuvenate, whether it's a walk outside, a minute of meditation, or even a full good night's sleep. You'll notice that this strategy is similar to the take a break strategy. And there's a reason it's coming up twice, and that's because it's so important. The different element here with rest and renewal compared to taking a break is that taking a break could be putting your work down and going and doing some laundry, or putting a project down for a couple weeks but continuing to work just as much as you always work, just on other projects. And rest and renewal is really about making sure that you get enough sleep, quality sleep, and that you spend waking time doing restful things. When you deprive yourself of rest, you deplete your creative reserves. So rest becomes actually an important tool in productivity, as well as in staying motivated and inspired and not getting burnt out. So those are the 8 strategies. Let's review them real quickly. Number 1 is to take breaks. Number 2, try something new. Number 3, get inspired by other creatives. And this involves staying connected to other creatives. Number 4, set boundaries around your creative work. Number 5, books and courses can really help. Number 6, talk things out. Number 7, be open to change. And number 8, don't forget about rest and renewal. Now we're going to talk about some tips for implementing these strategies. You can pick any or all of these to do. I'd love to hear about which ones you chose and how they helped you. The first one, right now, set yourself up to take a short break later. So fill up your kettle, put a tea bag in a mug, and set a timer for a tea break. Or put on your walking shoes and schedule a walk into your calendar, into your schedule for later today. In other words, just do something right now that schedules a break into your day today to increase the chances that you can take that break. The next tip is ask yourself if there's something you want to set aside right now for a period of time to come back to it later. If something feels like a real energy drain to you, then that's a good candidate to take a break from. The next tip is to brainstorm new things that you'd like to try. Just make a list. No matter how ridiculous something is, just brainstorm. I'm going to put welding on mine. Next, after making this brainstorm list, figure out if there are things that you could implement soon. Good candidates are things that are low cost, easy to access. You already have the materials on hand. So in my example, welding probably wouldn't be something I could implement really fast, but I might search for local welding courses in my area and find out more about that. In terms of something that I could implement really soon, I could take a Skillshare class on a new painting skill, for example. And then when you find something you can implement soon, take out your calendar, schedule this new thing so you can try it out. The next tip is to go to a bookstore or a museum or a gallery with no agenda other than to enjoy yourself and engage your curiosity. This might be true for you too, but it's easy for me to forego these things unless I really consciously take time to schedule going to a museum or a bookstore. I always love it when I do it, but in my day-to-day life, it's just not something that happens automatically. So take a minute right now and figure out when you can have a little bit of time to just enjoy looking at art. If you need to do it online, that's fine, but I would advise not doing it on social media. Rather, go to artists' websites or museum websites. The next tip is to identify one area of your creative work that could benefit from increased boundaries. So for example, if your habit is to work late into the night, you could come up with a boundary to cut off working at a certain time of day or evening. If your habit is to take on every project and so you end up overwhelmed and kind of spread too thin, set a boundary of what kinds of projects you'll say yes to, what kind of projects you'll say no to, or maybe a number of projects that you'll take on. Once you've decided what kind of boundary you could benefit from, write a plan for how to implement the boundary. You can look back at the 3 tips I offer for setting a boundary if you need help for implementing your idea. The next tip is to search for books and courses on topics that feel inspiring to you now, regardless of topic and regardless of how related it is to your own creative work. Just think about what interests you right now, or start somewhere and do research where you kind of go down a rabbit hole. You might find out about something that you didn't even know existed, but that really interests you. That's actually how I found out that surface pattern design even existed, is that I was drawing and painting all analog, and then I started doing it digitally on Procreate, and then I wanted to learn Adobe Illustrator, and I found Bonnie Christine, who teaches an Adobe Illustrator class, but it's about surface pattern design, which I didn't even know what it was. And once I found out about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. How did I not know? So you never know where it will lead when you just start out searching for something new. Another tip is to identify friends and colleagues you can talk to about your creative process, and then schedule a time to contact one of them for a chat. If you're a member of Creative Ease, our office hours are a perfect time to talk to me and other creatives. And you also likely have other friends and colleagues who you can run ideas by as well. Right now, either schedule time with someone for a chat, or schedule office hours for Creative Ease into your calendar, or even if you're not feeling the need to talk about anything in particular right now, queue up, make sure you've got names and contact information ready so that the next time you want to talk about your creative process with someone, you won't have to brainstorm about who to do it with. You'll have that information ready. The next tip is to spend some time journaling about how closely your current work aligns with your long-term goals and values and passions. If there are areas of stagnation or dissatisfaction, see if taking a break and implementing these other strategies in this course help. And if they don't help, evaluate whether these are areas that are ripe for a change. My final implementation tip is to check in with your sleep hygiene. If you've taken other courses with me, or if you're a member of Creative Ease, you know that I talk about sleep a lot. And that's because it's so foundational for so many things, not just our health and our well-being, but also for our creativity. So are you getting enough quality sleep? And if you're not, are there any interventions that might help, like a new pillow or a white noise machine, setting up alarms to remind you to get ready for bed at a certain time. It's hard to overemphasize how important sleep is for generating inspiration and motivation for our creativity. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, my email's here. You can email me anytime and I'll get back to you. If you're a Creative Ease member, hopefully I'll see you in office hours soon. I hope that you've enjoyed this course on balance and burnout and how to sustain your creative energy. Thanks. Keep creating.